animal cruelty and that kind of thing.
Mm.
I don't understand how to, because it hurts, when I see these things. It does affect me, and I don't understand how can it
Must
not
talk to. It's a
affect.
pity she's not on here. Debbie, have you met Debbie? Debbie Fox.
Oh yes, Debbie would be the right.
Debbie is a full-on vegan. I, I wouldn't say angry vegan, but yeah, flying the flag for the vegan. So we actually had this discussion in the last course. I think later on in the course, I've got a discussion session where we discuss it in quite a lot of detail. So how do you then how do you approach animals and suffering? But the course is pretty clear. Like all suffering, whether it's human, animal, whatever, is illusion. It's not ultimately real. All suffering. So it's asking us to make a blanket choice for reality and against unreality, which is why nothing real can be threatened, right? The formless.
I look, yeah. If I look at, let's say I've gone to like places and stuff where animals were rescued, and obviously I've like felt animals that have been through, any abuse or torture or anything that they've gone through, and I can literally like feel their pain. I'm pretty much a bit of an animal empath, so, but how can that, I don't understand how to actually like make that make sense for me in terms of, but I can see this animal is suffering. And let's just say like, I scroll on Facebook and someone posted something on hunting, and it was a boar with a baby piglet. And I mean, I don't understand how to ever be at peace when things like that is going on.
Well, that I wouldn't say it's easy, but the course gives the answer, right? Nothing unreal exists. And the only way you're ever gonna find peace in this world is to see that all these illusions, whatever happens in form, whatever you see with your eyes, whatever you perceive in this world is illusion. It's not true. Ultimately, it's a projection of a split mind, of the ego mind that has disconnected itself from love and has decided to go and create its own little kingdom where all this stuff apparently happens. And pain and suffering are just absolutely entrenched in it. It's the world has always been like that, and it always will be like that. And the course is just saying, well, see it for what it is. The whole idea that you can be separate from love is the problem. That's the entire idea. And from that come all the miscreations that you see, all the pain and the suffering. And of course, it seems to be real within the illusion, within the thought system of the ego. Pain is inescapable. Suffering is inescapable. Death, these things. But ultimately, the whole reality is not real. So that's why he says nothing unreal exists. So the animal suffering.
Does that mean that the animal that I see a picture of that's been shot with the baby, is that also an illusion? So
yeah, it's all illusion. Everything.
No suffering.
Yeah, everything.
There's been no shooting.
Yeah, everything. Right? Everything you see in this world. That's what he's saying. There's no exception. Everything you see in this world is illusion. Right? Because what are you seeing it through? You're seeing it through the body's eyes, and you're hearing with the body's ears. Right? That the body is a construct of the mind, of the ego mind. The spirit didn't make up the body. It's the ego that made it up. So the ego has created this separate vehicle, this apparent form, this body, which your consciousness now seems to be attached to, seems to live in, this seems to be your home. And it's given you these sense perceptions to perceive this external world that it's telling you is real through the sense perceptions, right? But it's a setup from a much higher level. The ego mind that wanted to split off from God and have its own identity created all of this, miscreated or made it up, if you like, because of course uses language very specific. Creation is about, you know, what's true creation, what's eternal, and the ego makes illusions, right? So this is a made-up illusion based on a false belief that we can be separate from our Creator, from love, from Source. And once you do that, so once you make one split, and you make that decision to go, yes, we wanted it, we all did. You couldn't come here if you didn't want separation. So now you choose the separation, you choose a separate identity, and you have to accept all the consequences that go with it. It's a complete thought system unto itself. The pain, the suffering, the sickness, the death are all part of that system. What the Course is saying is you've got to go outside of the system to find your way out of this. You will never find any kind of salvation within the system, which is kind of what you're saying. You know, how do I deal with this I'm seeing the suffering, how do I deal with it? You've got to transcend the whole system and go, the suffering isn't real. The animals aren't real. The whole thing is just images projected out of an insane mind. And now, you know, these apparently separate minds are somehow suffering. But it's just not true. Sorry, you want to ask a question?
And now I've got conflicting thoughts. Damn it! What a mind. Because one of it is, a part of me is like saying, but then that means you're just going to allow it. You're going to allow the baby crying. You're going to allow the baby to be shot.
Well, can you do anything about it?
You're just going to allow that.
If you could do something about it.
You're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah, if you could do something about it, then the loving thing to do would be to do something about it. But most of the time, if it's happening on Facebook or somewhere else in the world, there's nothing you can do about it. Absolutely nothing. So Jesus is very clear. He says, seek not.
Where I can, I do.
Yeah, if you can, you do. But, you know, your power as a limited, you know, human being, just with the body, and you've only got so much time and so many resources and so much you can do, you can't fix it all. You can't suddenly make suffering go away. And also, what you've got to remember is that suffering is that animal's lesson too, right? Everything that incarnates here has an ego. And the only way that the ego is ever going to be undone is through some kind of awareness that, hang on, there's something else. I don't want this suffering. I don't want this pain. And so I'm willing to correct my mind and go to spirit. And everything here, every separate parent living entity that has a body is on that journey somewhere. They're on the continuum. So, you know, unless the animal suffers, it can't wake up. And that awakening might only happen in 100 lifetimes when it becomes human. Who knows? No one really knows. But the point is that only through the experiencing that suffering can we ever make a choice to leave. Do you see? So built into the very construct of the ego, the suffering and the pain that are absolutely integral to its thought system, is also your way out, because that pain and suffering eventually become intolerable to the mind, and the mind starts to go, well, why am I suffering? Why is this happening? And that's when awakening can start to happen, because you can go, okay, well, maybe, and this is our opportunity as human beings, is we can question this. Animals, as far as we know, can't. Now, the pig can't go, oh, I'm going to question my suffering. I'm going to question whether I'm actually real, whether my identity as a pig is real. I don't think it can do that. But as human beings, we can. Right? We're in a form where we have the ability to transcend form, which means that you've got a great opportunity. And that's your only job.
They incarnate, and the suffering and the pain is part and parcel of it.
Yeah, if you incarnate into form, you believe in the ego, because you must believe in the ego. You must believe in separation to come into a form. It's inevitable, right? If you only believed in perfect oneness, and that was all that was in your mind, then form is impossible. This world is impossible, as he says quite often in the Course. So it's an impossible choice that we made. And now that you made the impossible choice, well, you have to live in this form and in this world that seems to be very harsh, very cruel, where there's pain and suffering, and it's kind of impossible. You can't escape within the world's thought system. You'll never escape by listening to the ego, because the ego will just keep you here, coming back for more pain and more suffering. It's only by going, hang on, there's something else outside of this.
The thoughts that come is it's unjust, it's cruel. We live in a cruel world. Why are people so cruel to each other and to animals? Why would they do this? And then there's an urge to try to make a change so that doesn't have to go on anymore. And it's like I can't just overlook it. Like
Well,
I'm struggling to just
the Course is saying you must overlook it. He's saying very clearly, forgiveness overlooks all pain, all suffering, all appearances, because it transcends the illusion completely. If you make any of this real, then the ego is real in your mind, and then you suffer. Who suffers? You suffer. Because now you feeling not loving, you feeling like there's something other than love going on in your mind. And so the only way to correct your mind is to deny it all, right? You can't accept a little part of the ego's thought system, not accept all of it. And I'm not saying this is an easy path, but there's no other way. The more you look at this, and you can go into any spiritual teaching. In the end, it's like it comes down to, well, how do you deal with all this evil and all this pain and all this suffering that goes on in the world?
Yeah.
How do you approach that? And the Course has the only way out that I can see. Advaita Vedanta is the Eastern equivalent, also as a non-dual teaching. But the Course is very, very clear on its teaching and forgiveness, saying you've got to let go of your perception of this as real. That's what forgiveness is. As long as you make it real in your mind, well, then the ego is real, because then that thought system of separation and the pain and the suffering just keeps. When you're thinking those thoughts and you're feeling those emotions, then the ego is real in your experience, isn't it?
It's the sense perceptions that actually sort of kick in and activate it, if I think about it.
But it's a setup.
I see the suffering. I see the suffering. I hear the screaming. I feel it also. But these are all sense perceptions.
Yeah.
So it's actually perceiving through the individual self.
Yes.
Not through the old.
And then what happens is your individual self, the ego, interprets that in a certain way and goes, oh, this is dreadful, all this suffering, this is terrible, I've got to do something about it. And the Course is saying forgiveness does nothing. It just quietly looks. So what you've got to do is you've got to look at it differently. He says very clearly, seek not to change the world, but seek to change your mind about the world. But it's not going to help to try and fix the problem on the level of form. We've been trying that forever, and it still hasn't worked. There's still pain and suffering and cruelty in the world, and there always will be.
So how do we help?
So you help by correcting. Once you can correct your perception, and you can find a place where you're actually free of that. You're actually like, you know what, I don't believe in pain and suffering anymore. I'm not actually affected by all these appearances. Then you become the source of love and light in the world. Then you become the Christ, as Jesus was. He'd let go of all those ideas of pain and suffering that didn't really exist for him anymore. And so he could bring people into that healing frequency, and he could heal them, because it's like there's no pain and suffering. And so, they're sick, and anyone who's sick or suffering has got an illusion going on in their mind that sickness and suffering are real, and that therefore they're experiencing it. And the only way to really help them is to teach them by your own belief and your own presence that it's not real. That actually there's a way out, that they can transcend this in their mind. Now, you can't necessarily help the animals do that, because you can't speak to them, you can't teach them, higher awareness and stuff. But you can help people to do that. There's 8 billion odd people, who on a spiritual journey who can do this. And obviously, if people become more enlightened, they let go of the ego and they become kinder, then animals will benefit. Then this kind of thing won't go on, because people won't do that to animals when they're feeling the oneness and they're not in the ego. So transformation is the only way out. You've got to help people to correct their minds. And maybe I said to Debbie, maybe that's your calling. Help people to to find this place in their mind and maybe make some more conscious choices. Now, it doesn't mean that because you do not, forgiveness says do nothing, that you should necessarily always do nothing on the level of the world. Okay, so you don't want to eat meat. Fine, that's a perfectly acceptable conscious choice. The problem is just don't make everyone else who eats meat wrong and judge them and condemn them, because then you're just playing straight into the ego's hands. That's just another separation going on in your mind, and then you become, I'm the special vegan versus the
like
so
that I've seen that doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. So you got to be very careful about.
I would like to actually find a way to help in some way, and if the way through that is through self-transformation and through the own energy that I then emit, then that's the way. Because that was just that one thing that was conflicting, because to me that is a very real. Just give me 1 second. Xanor. Oh no! It's the sleeping Zop. It's the sleeping Zop. Sorry about that. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. So what will happen? If you really do this course and you follow the whole process, there's a section, an exercise on your higher purpose, and that tends to unfold. If you really do this work and you really find a place in your mind where you can transcend these illusions, start coming into your higher self, then often you get some guidance, you get some inspiration. It's okay, this is what you could do. But remember, it's not about fixing the world. You've got to always remember that, right? It's actually your own path to enlightenment. That's what it's about. It's about learning your own lessons. And then, for you might learn those lessons most effectively in this forum. And okay, you want to help animals, you want to heal animals, you want to try and, but really what you're doing is you're healing your own mind in the process, because you are doing your own forgiveness in the process, and then you're extending love through that particular channel. And the more you do that, the more expanded you feel, the more you correct your mind. And that's the whole point. The point is not to fix the world. That's why he says, seek not to change the world, but seek to change your mind about the world. Because you can't fix a thought system that's fundamentally broken. Do you see? And it's a very important philosophical distinction.
It feels so, like, I know, it's like a complete contradiction to like everything. Oh my God, I have an ad. Give me 1 second. Okay,
the ad on Zoom. Seriously.
Yeah. I really don't know why this happens. Maybe it's just because I'm going to try put Zoom on my iPad instead of the phone. Maybe it's different. I don't know. But
no. I'm not taking an ad. Carol, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Good.
The idea that immediately kicks in. Sorry, I don't want to take up too much time right now. The idea that immediately kicks in, but is, oh my God, that's so cruel. Yeah. So where's that coming from? Because I thought that
cruelty is of the ego, right? The ego is a cruel God, and he talks about this a lot in the text, in the workbook. This ego is a cruel God. It's a false image of what you think God is, right? A false identity that's cruel, that's harsh, that's punishing, that's judgmental, that's condemnatory. And then when all of that gets manifested and projected out into the physical world, which is the projection of the ego, what you see is a cruel world, because it's coming from a cruel thought system. But Jesus is saying, don't get deceived by the appearances, right? Go back into the mind and look at where it originates. And it originates in a thought, that's all. It's a thought that I could be separate from God, right? That's the whole descent into hell idea. So, you start off in perfect oneness, and then at some point we had this crazy mad idea, tiny mad idea, Jesus calls it, where we decided to separate from oneness, which was not a clever idea at all. We thought, it was just a random kind of, oh, what if I wasn't one? Well, that could be kind of interesting. Well, then I could have my own identity. Oh, that could be interesting. You can see, curiosity killed the cat. Oh, then now suddenly there's something else going on in your mind.
The animals did the same.
Well,
So like an ant also...
because it all started off. The entire universe started off from a single split, right? There's only one mind, really. That's God's mind. And then this other thought entered somewhere, not in that mind, but it kind of separated itself off and went, oh, what if I wasn't one with this perfect love and light, this perfect beingness? What if I wasn't one? What if I could have my own identity? That could be kind of interesting. And that was the first tiny mad idea, which seemed to be an innocent wondering, seemed to be like, oh, well, what's the harm in that? But when you do that, you deny truth. And so now what happens? The next step is you create a separate identity. So it's like, oh yeah, I'm my own identity. I'm self-created now. I'm not one with my creator. I've got my own identity going on here. And that seems to be quite cool. The ego goes, oh, great. Yeah. So I can decide what I want. I can do what I want. I don't need God. I don't need any of this. Great. The problem with that is underneath that lies this tremendous guilt. Because once you decide to split from God and you have to basically deny oneness. So basically you've denied everything that's true, everything that's pure and holy and true, your source, your creator, you've denied it all in order to be separate. So that produces this intense guilt, the sense that you've done something terribly wrong, right? That's the sin of the ego, separate identity named. And then the guilt that comes with that is on a level that's, we covered all over, because to deal with that guilt, we couldn't, right? So instead of just doing the sensible thing, listening to the Holy Spirit and saying, look, this is all a load of nonsense. You can't separate from your creator. It's impossible. It's an impossible idea. Just forget this whole ridiculous idea of being separate and go back to oneness and just be in the perfect oneness of your creator. We believe the ego, and the ego then tries to create some kind of solution for this apparent problem, which isn't really a problem because it's an illusory problem. It's all happening in the mind. And so then it says, well, you got to get out of here. God's going to kill you. Of course, this is its own, cruel God. It's its own. The ego's made itself its own God.
Yeah.
It's its own conception.
It's a cruel world. It's a cruel God.
Yes, but that's the only thing that can happen when you do this in your mind. You split off from God. You create a false God, a false identity, and that now becomes your God. That's now instructing you. It's telling you what to do, and it's saying, run away. This is terrible. God's going to kill you. You got to run and hide somewhere where God can't find you. And
that's the whole thing doesn't make sense to me. Because when I look at it, and okay, people not eating animals, fine, okay, animal to each other also.
Yeah, but
so
the whole system. What the course is
saying, it's like
you got to understand what the course is saying is that the entire system is insane, right? So you can't try and make sense of a little bit of it and go, well, I can sort of maybe try and understand people because people are, but animals kill each other. Everything feeds off everything else here. Everything kills everything else, and because that's the ego's thought system. The ego is based on the idea of I stole my life from God, so it's me or the other. We can't all be alive. It's one or the other. And so we create a world based on that idea, which shows up as a very cruel world. As well, in order for me to live, something else has to die. Whether it's an animal, a plant, we have to consume food. So the carrot has to die to support our physical body. We don't think of it as a death, but maybe the carrot has a consciousness. Who knows? Maybe it feels pain.
That's the thing also, because I connect to nature in general. So I'm not your typical vegan that's going to say plants don't have feelings, because everything actually has a conscience to some sort of level.
Well, if it's alive,
yes,
it's got
we're
some
not
kind
eating
of
the animal.
consciousness. But
Yes.
the point here is all of it's part of a deeply flawed system. Do you understand
Okay.
that? It's so you can't try and make sense, and this is where most spiritual paths go wrong, because they start trying to make sense of this flawed system, and you can't really make sense of the flawed system. It doesn't make sense, which is kind of what the Course is saying. Jesus just says it's an insane world, and you don't even appreciate how insane it is. It's completely insane, because what else could come from an insane idea that you're not what you are? This is the result of it. When it gets projected out and it gets thought over and over, and this has been going on for billions of years, well, then you create a world like this that seems to be cruel, that seems to be harsh, where everything suffers, everything dies. And he's saying
this is actually like the most sort of sane answer I've found so far.
It's
The
the
whole
only
idea,
answer.
because
You won't
like
find another.
plants, yeah, okay, I'm not a meat eater, but the plants, people don't understand about agricultural nature and that sense also. So to understand that all of it actually falls under that blanket actually makes a lot more sense. So thank you. I'm gonna actually just ask for guidance from within to just allow that to assimilate and
Yeah,
so I
okay.
can get
I'm just
a
going to share my screen
deeper
quickly.
understanding of it.
I'll just share my screen. Hopefully it won't bomb me out. Okay, it looks like it's happened. That's good. It happened.
It froze.
It's frozen. Okay.
Oh wow, okay. It's like
Can
a
you see
robot.
that?
Okay, no, I can see it.
Yeah.
I can see it.
So this was the descent into hell. So, you asked for a little discussion on it. So here we're having it. Well, like, I don't mind, like, if you want to talk about it, because I can talk about this stuff all day. It's fine. So that's just an illustration of what I was talking about. And this, like, I haven't seen this kind of an explanation from any other spiritual teaching or path of just exactly how this whole thing works. And the course is a comprehensive, high-level overview, and then he also takes you, where you are in your life, and he's teaching you how to correct your mind from where you are. So he's not just giving you this. He's saying, okay, yeah, so you think you're down here at the bottom of the ladder, which we'll get to, and this is the way out. This is the way that you can get back to God or love or oneness, right? So this thought of separation started it all, which was the fall. That created, apparently, this ego, or it's also called the universal mind, called Satan. Of course, just calls it the ego. But this idea that I'm a separate entity. I'm not perfect oneness. I've got some separate identity going on. And then the second kind of level down the ladder is this idea of individuality. Okay, now I'm separate. Hey, I can be separate. I can have my own identity. In fact, I can have multiple fragmented, separate identities, because this is what the ego does, fragments over and over and over again into all these individual forms. Well, form hasn't happened yet, but the thought system, started it all. So this individuality, which is made up of division and duality, right? Division and duality. Okay. So you have to have separation and you have to have duality in order to have individuality, which is kind of all the Course is saying. You can't have individuality and oneness. They contradict each other, and you will never reconcile them. They are contradictory ideas. So you have to choose. And that leads to this idea of separate identity named, which is, just an acronym for sin. And the sin is so deep-seated, because it's the very sin, at the core of our individual existence. It'll never go away as long as you believe you're an individual. You think you're an individual? Yes. Sin comes with a package. You think because in order to be individual, you think you've had to destroy love. Yes. See, that's the problem. That's the original sin that they talk about in the Bible. That's what it really is this idea that, we stole our identity from God, and you know what? We had to destroy God in order to do it. And now it doesn't matter what we do within this individual identity. We are sinful and we're guilty, and therefore we deserve to be punished.
And right? That's why this whole projection is just absolute madness.
Yes, because you're
The
trying to
way it
solve a
looks.
problem that doesn't really exist. The problem of separation doesn't really exist. It was a false idea to start with. Perfect oneness is perfect oneness is perfect oneness. It always will be, it always has been, and it can't change. So now, yes, you got this whole other thing going on in your mind, but it's just false. It's not true. It's illusion. And now we're trying to solve the problems created by, the one false idea with the same mind that created the false idea, the ego. Well, that's never going to work, is it? That's what the Course is saying. Within the system, there's no hope. So now you have this false expectation of punishment appearing real because you think that you're going to be punished by the ego, of course. This is your own miscreated projection of a God. It's not real. It's not what love is, because love has no idea that any of this is even going on. Love can't punish what doesn't even exist. And so we create the concept of a fearful, wrathful, separate God, or gods. There's many systems that have multiple gods, but they all have this element of judgment and condemnation. And if you do the wrong thing, I'm going to punish you, etc. The whole.
They have personality traits, which I found it's kind of like reflections of people.
Yes, the Greek gods and the Roman gods, they were like people. They were just like super people who had superpowers, but they had all these. Well, but that's just a projection of the ego. That's not really God. That's just a made-up version. Well, okay, we'll create some kind of projected super ego. And they have seemingly superpowers, but they have these personalities and all these character flaws, and they have all these dramas going on. That's just the human mind, creating. It's an illusion of what God or gods is, and there's always this element of fear and punishment and guilt and sin going on.
What about the times that you sort of, because I've had a couple of experiences of this, of you just sort of slip out of the matrix, let's say, and what seems to be impossible happens. Let's take an example of, I'm going to choose an example that seems ridiculous because, well, I've seen and been through a lot of things, but let's say someone walks through a door or a wall or something. What about those moments where something that is completely, well, we've been told is completely impossible, could not, should not happen, but has happened? What do we do with moments like that?
Completely impossible in terms of the laws of time and space.
Yes.
Well, that's a miracle then. It means that there's something other than time and space, the laws of time and space, which is something to be very happy about.
Yeah, no, I was very happy about all the different things and all the different glimpses that I've had. For me, what I take it as actually is a reminder. Each time something like that happens, it kind of reminds me that there's more than just this, what I'm seeing and touching and feeling and hearing. It's like an instant reminder that takes you to a place that, if that didn't happen, it really wouldn't take you there, because you couldn't comprehend that at a certain level unless you actually experience it. So I've had a couple of these, and I see them as reminders, and I see energy constantly. I've always have as a child, and I also use that as a reminder actually that there is more than just the physical, than what we see. If I look up at the sky, it's what I see. I see energy, I see movement, I see thought patterns and things.
Yeah, so you're seeing a little bit beyond the veil of illusion. You're seeing to the, ultimately there's only mind. Ultimately there's only mind. Energy is just projected thought, right? Projected out of the mind. This is all thought. Quantum physics says nothing here is real. It's just, they can't even say what it is. Freaks them out. So they're like, well, there's nothing really there. It's just seems to be there, and there seem to be, all these laws in the illusion. But once you go down to the quantum level, it all gets very chaotic. It all starts to break down, and they don't really know how to explain it.
And what seems solid actually has bigger and bigger spaces. So then it doesn't make sense.
There's nothing there. Like, they can't even find a particle. There isn't really such a thing as a particle. There's nothing solid about it. All it is it's a projection of the mind. This is all mind. It's apparently physical, but it's projected thought. That's what we're living in. We're living in a matrix of projected thought. And you, the observer, and the observed thing, the apparent world, are not separate. The world doesn't exist without you. And this is a scientific principle. The quantum mechanics, the Copenhagen interpretation of it is there is no reality in the absence of observation. There's no reality in the absence of observation. So it doesn't exist unless you observe it to exist, independent of you. It comes into being by your perception of it. That's exactly what the Course is saying, right? We made this all up. We did it on such a level that we've now forgotten. We've come all the way down this ladder of the dream. We now, we did this whole Big Bang, this projection of guilt and fear outwards to miscreate a physical universe. This really toxic, horrible thought, just because we couldn't deal with it in the mind. So we're like, right, we'll get rid of it. We'll project it out. And that's the explosion that created the universe. Again, the cosmologist science says there was a moment of creation where the entire universe came into being. They cannot explain why it came into being, but they can tell you what happened, the moment afterwards and subsequently. But they'll tell you how it all unfolded, but they can't tell you why. Because the why is a metaphysical question. It's a philosophical question. It's not something that science can answer. Why did it happen? Well, the Course answers that. It happened because it was this projection of guilt and fear outwards, the desire to be separate, first of all, to create separate entities and separate forms, underlain by the guilt and the fear that the ego mind just couldn't cope with. So it was like, right, now we're going to project it all out, get it out of the mind, and we're going to literally go out of our mind. That's what we did. We went out of our mind into an illusion of a reality that's apparently physical. It's out of our mind. And if you think you're a body, then you're out of your mind, aren't you? You must be out of your mind, because you don't think you're a mind anymore. You think you're a physical body, and that's the illusion. That's the illusion.
Well, this makes a lot of sense, actually.
Exactly.
And now all the miracles, the misunderstood miracles, biblical sense, I think it's misunderstood, but the things, let's just say the things that Jesus did, it actually makes a lot of sense as to the how and the why and the everything. It makes complete sense of this is all just a projection.
Yeah, it's a projection of a mind that's gone insane. Now, you can't try and make sense of that mind. The Course has got a very clear distinction. He's saying, do not try and make sense of the ego's thought system. Do not try and reconcile truth to illusion. You will never do it. The ego mind simply is unreal, and it needs to be seen as such, and it needs to be undone in your own mind. That's the only place you can undo it. You can't undo it for anyone else. You're a little fragment of this mind that's now incarnated in this apparently separate universe, in these separate forms of matter and energy, all the animals and people and etc. And then you get this whole idea of evolution, that you get increasingly complex and sophisticated separate forms of life, whose minds really have identified with their forms. An animal thinks it's the animal. The human thinks it's human. That's what the ego's done. It's put you in a form, in a body, in a world to make the separation real. And it's given you these sense perceptions to confirm it over and over in your mind. No, it's real. Look, it's happening. How can you deny that it's happening? But it's happening in a mind. It's happening in an insane mind. That's what's happening.
Your relationship I spoke to you of. Now, if that person that was here was also part of this projection and of the insane mind that is not happening, this is all actually an illusion, then we were never disconnected to begin with. It was never a separate body, and so we are not actually disconnected still.
Yes. Oneness is still true.
Even through the death of the body, or what we've seen as the death of the body in this illusion, it's all still there. Nothing's gone.
The mind cannot die. That person cannot die because their mind, there's a part of their mind that is eternal. It's created by God. So their consciousness cannot be destroyed. They can, attach their consciousness to different forms, which is what we do all the time. And then we reincarnate and we get another form. And then, we go through a life and we discard that. But you can't die. It's impossible. So they haven't really gone anyway. Ramana Maharshi is a great Indian sage. Yeah. He was on his way out. He had cancer. And, all one of his disciples like, oh, Master, I'll be, so sorry to miss you. He's like, I'm going nowhere. I can't die. Did you get it? It's like, you not understand. He said, why are you sad? And the disciple said, well, I'm sad because I miss you. He says, no, you're sad because your individual personal identity thinks that it would like to have my body and my personality in the illusion to interact with and communicate with and spend time with and whatever. That's why you're sad.
That's exactly it.
That's why you're sad.
We miss the body.
Honest.
Because we're missing the shape that it took.
Your mind attached to the body is now going to miss that form. But, the master's like, but I'm not the form. So you can't really miss what doesn't even exist. You are one with me on another level. So if you go to that level, then we are one, and I've gone nowhere. I'm with you always. I am you. We are one. Every great spiritual master said the same thing throughout the ages, which means that there must be something to it. And the Course just puts it into a framework that is very, very clear. The logical mind can understand this. It's like, okay, I understand. We've made all these missteps. We've come down here. We're now in this illusion, knocking around, thinking that we're separate forms, thinking we're individuals, that we, believe we're the victims of an unfair world. We're living a helpless, innovated little life. Right? Innovated means weakened. Limitation, lack, loneliness, and suffering before our bodies die. We all live under a death sentence. We're going to die here. The form identity and the body is going to die. It's guaranteed. It's a done deal. The moment you're born, you might have 70, 80, 90, 100 years, maybe less, maybe more, but you are on a pathway to death. That's just a given if you're human. So, of course, the same, but like, what an insane system. What kind of an insane mind would create such a system where death is inevitable? Well, only this ego mind, which wants death, it wants the fear, it wants the guilt, the accusation, the blame, the complaint, the attack of God's other human beings and separate forms as a projection of subconscious guilt to try and get rid of it. So this is a key mechanism you've got to understand, right? So what the ego tries to get you to do is, instead of feeling the guilt within you, this deep metaphysical guilt at the sin of destroying God or love or oneness, it says, no, you're not guilty. Someone else is guilty. So you can give the guilt to them. They're the guilty ones, and they'll be punished by God.
No.
You see how it does? And so then we want to blame. Blame is just projection of guilt. Right? I feel the urge to accuse and blame and complain and attack. What I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to get rid of this metaphysical guilt and dump it onto someone else. So you're now going to be crucified. You're now going to be punished by God. You're now going to be killed. And I'm off the hook because I've given my guilt to you. But the problem is you're not off the hook. Because the more you believe in that thought system, the more you believe in guilt and sin and fear, the more you project it out, the more you are confirming your belief in it, aren't you?
Yes.
Saying to your mind, I must be guilty if I'm giving guilt in the form of blame all the time, because I can't give what I don't have.
Then it must exist.
And it must exist because I'm giving it all the time. And now I'm seeing its results coming back at me all the time, because if you keep blaming and accusing and attacking people, then, what do you expect? You're going to get attack and you're going to fear, and you get caught in this vicious cycle of defense and attack, and I'm trying to defend myself by attacking and trying to project. And, we've seen the results of that over human history repeatedly. Wars, conflict, violence, horrific stuff as a result of really just an insane thought system.
No sense. and I've always tried to make sense of something that just makes no sense. It just never made sense to me.
No, and so, you know, the
And I
relief
think
of the
that's where
course.
I wait to try to make sense of it.
Yeah. The relief of the course is that it's just telling it like it is. It's saying, look, you can't make sense of this. You'll never find any kind of sanity within this thought system. It makes no sense because it was based on a false idea to start with. So therefore, everything that comes from a false idea must be false. And if it's false and untrue, then of course it's not going to make sense. You never will make sense of it. You just have to see it for what it is. And so now our job down
joyful
here.
experiences?
Sorry?
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, you can't.
I was going to say, what about the joyful experiences where we do experience connection and love on a deeper level, you know?
Well, that's because,
where does that fit in?
well, where that fits in is that's coming from your true mind, right? Your right mind is still part of God, still believes in love and oneness, still knows that there's something else other than this illusion, this insane illusion that you've created. And any peace, any joy, any love, anything positive comes from there, because that's still a part of your mind.
Through the body. Does it work like the body is then like the vessel?
Yeah. So, you know, and this is what the course is trying to train you to do, is, you know, to be a channel for love or oneness to come into the world and extend itself in the world, because it's still there. Okay. It wants to extend, it wants to heal, it wants to bless everyone, because that's all that love wants to do. Of course, that's opposed by the ego's thought system, which is trying to shut that out desperately and doing its best to convince you that you are separate, and that the guilt and the fear and the sin and the cruelty is real. Because when you believe that, then there can't be love, right? Cruelty and love don't go together. They're opposite. And so that's why it's created a world that just confirms over and over, confirms this thought system on which it was based to start with. Well, that's, what else can you expect? If you have a false thought system based on guilt, sin, fear, and attack, then whatever it creates is going to just show you that those ideas are real, isn't it?
So does that apply also to, let's say, you pierce the veil and you see forms of energy? I just see it as forms of energy. Sometimes it can come in as fearful forms of energy. Usually if I'm in a state of fear, anxiety, or anything like that, then I will perceive those kinds of things also. But those also all fall under the blanket of this is all just projection also, again, and it's actually illusion.
Yeah. Or anything negative, any fear, any guilt, any sin, any of this stuff that comes within the ego's thought system and the world that it's created must be illusion, because only oneness, only love is true. So any fear must be false, any guilt must be false, attack is false.
So it's on this plane and sort of like other planes. I'm not too sure how to explain it, because it's kind of like there's another plane that people don't necessarily always see, but it's there. The same one where you say you have your angels, but I have had other experiences also, which made me very scared as a child. But eventually, it didn't scare me anymore. But like those also fall under the same. So it's kind of like the one spiritual message that I'm getting from the one side is coming from that God, love, and oneness, that source.
Yeah.
And the other side is actually the illusory projection.
Yeah.
Just it's kind of the same, just on a different plane.
Well, remember, in oneness there are no levels. So ultimately, perfect oneness is perfect oneness. There's no separation. There's no split. There are no levels. That's the ultimate truth. That's God. In this illusion,
but I see it as,
in this illusion, we've apparently created many levels. Right? There's the level of form, level of the body. There's all kinds of mental stuff going on. So there's the mind level. There's, levels in the etheric that people can see, but it's all a creation of the mind. Right? Anything that's not perfect oneness is a miscreation of the ego mind. It's just spinning itself around in this illusion, trying to convince itself really that the illusion's real, because it still wants a separate identity. You see, on some level, we're all terrified to give this up, because if we give up our individuality, then who would we be? Well, no ego. There would be no separate self, right?
It feels like a soft bridge to me. Let's say working with what people call angels, or it's oneness. It's source itself. It's kind of like, like the Holy Spirit in different forms to ease you into it.
Yeah,
that's what it kind of feels
right?
like.
In this world, everything's symbolic. So if you see the angels as a symbol of God or love or oneness, and that's helpful, well, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a stepping stone in the right direction. But ultimately, none of that exists. Ultimately, the Course is saying only God exists, only love exists, and it's all one.
Yeah.
There's only one mind, and there can't be separate angels and separate beings. And there's only this pure source, this pure oneness. And your job is simply to merge your mind with that, to go back to that, to be reabsorbed into the oneness. So that's all that's in your mind. There is none of this going on anymore. And
is the Holy Spirit not the bridge between?
Yeah.
Like, isn't that sort of like we get the inspiration, let's say, from the Holy Spirit, which then guides us towards acting towards love, which is our source.
Yeah. So there's this perfect love or oneness, which just really has no conception of the separation of anything else, because if it did have a conception of it, it would be imperfect. But there has to be some kind of a bridge to get back there, and that's the Holy Spirit. So the Holy Spirit sits in between here, and now in every situation you encounter as an individual, you now have these two voices. You have the Holy Spirit, which says, forget all this nonsense about guilt and fear and attack. Just recognize that it's all false, and that whatever you're seeing that seems to justify this is false. And so don't believe a word of it. Don't believe any of it. And just find a place of peace and calm and love in your mind where you're okay. When you're in that place, you're okay. And from that place, if you're going to say anything, if you're going to do anything, it's going to be much more helpful, much more inspired, much more helpful, much more effective in this world. And the other thought is the ego's thought system that's going, oh, no. This is all real. This matters a lot. You've got to get scared about this. You've got to take some kind of action to protect yourself. You've got to do something. And there's all this kind of interbulation that goes with that really doesn't feel very good, which is kind of how we got ourselves into the mess in the first place, because that interbulation was what created the physical universe in the first place, right? A dramatic kind of disastrous split in the mind, all this chaos going on, and then it all gets spewed out, and we miscreate a physical universe. And now we're trying to make sense of it, but it doesn't make sense. And this is all the Course is saying. You will never make sense of it. You just need to see it. You need to see it for what it is. So the Holy Spirit doesn't necessarily try and fix the world, because it's saying that there is no world. You can't fix what doesn't even exist. But what you can do is you can see it correctly. You can correct your perception of it. And while you're here, you can find a way of living quite peacefully and quite happily and quite harmoniously. Even though you're living in this, parallel world where all this is going on, because it's just, you don't make it real in your experience anymore. Like, okay, I see the animal, I see the form of the animal suffering. Now you have a choice, right? There's always a choice. You can go, oh, that's terrible, that's awful, it's a cruel world. Well, what does that do? It just confirms that you're a separate individual who's perceiving this apparently other thing that's separated from you, suffering and dying, and you go, this is all terribly cruel. And some people go, but how can you not perceive this? Because if you don't perceive it, then you're being uncaring. But the ego is very, very cunning, because it uses this just to hook you in to the belief that you're separate, that you're an individual. Just confirms that in your mind every time you do you see that, which just means that you're part of the system and you won't escape. As long as you want to believe that, well, guess what? Back you come for another life where you can have the same perceptions. If you want to perceive that, fine, come have another body, have another life, perceive that all you want, because you get every opportunity to perceive it here, because there will be suffering and pain and cruelty and death in your next life too. And if that's really what you want, then by all means, come back and, do it again. But the Course is saying, look, there's a way out of this. You don't have to do it again repeatedly, because the dream makes no sense. This whole thing makes absolutely no sense at all. It's completely insane. And there's no hope of finding happiness or peace or anything good in the dream if you believe the dream and you believe the ego that created it.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty desperate illusion, which is kind of why the world is a pretty desperate place. But you can perceive it truly. You can perceive it from this perspective of God or love or oneness, to just go, none of this is true. None of this is real. So I don't need to get all het up about this. I don't need to try and, fix the world, change what doesn't even exist, because that just makes it real. Right? I might have a calling, like this inner calling that says, okay, Nadia, go there, do that. And if that helps you to connect with your higher self, with God, love, oneness, and that's part of your journey home, then that's what you should be doing. And the Holy Spirit will guide you. But you're not trying to fix the form. You're actually doing it to correct your own mind. So it's a very, very different way of looking at the world. But it's the only way that's going to get you home. Because any other way, you start to make any of this stuff real, even by trying to change it. People are like, no, you got to fight against this, fight against that. I watched a video yesterday by, it was a little documentary, a guy called Lewis Pugh. I don't know if you've heard of him. He does swimming in the Arctic and the Antarctic. Like in, absolutely freezing water, like water just above freezing. He's in there and he's swimming for 20 minutes.
Oh, is it the Iceman?
Yeah, the Iceman. Yeah.
Is it the Iceman?
That might be Wim Hof. But this like does this like extreme stuff.
No, that's the one. I know.
And he's doing it.
Oh, okay.
He's doing it supposedly because he's going, no. He says, I will stand, I will fight. I want to save these wilderness areas against the indifference of world leaders. And I'm protecting these penguins, and that's why I'm doing it. And there's a cost and there's a price to pay, but I'm willing to pay it. And you look at the whole thought system and you go, okay, if you really unpack it in terms of this, it's all ego-based, right? He's making himself as an individual real.
Yeah.
He's making the problems real. He's making the cause real. He's created a whole special identity for himself out of this cause. That's like his core identity now. Lewis Pugh, the champion of the wilderness areas, and he's got to keep swimming and doing it. I mean, I wouldn't like to do it. Geez, I mean, 20 minutes.
That's the madness of it, because once you stop, well, what are you?
Like, serious, yeah, exactly. So if he stops, like, so then what's my purpose? So, I mean, eventually it might kill him. Who knows? Because you can't. I mean, he's swimming through a bloody tunnel in the ice. There's this, the Antarctic ice kind of sheet. And he's gone, right, I'm going to swim through a tunnel, right, in this bloody great big glacier. And then he's halfway through the tunnel and he has this big crack. And he's like, oh, shit, what's going to happen now? Am I going to die because all this ice is going to come tumbling down on me? And it didn't that time. But another time it could quite easily, because, you're in nature, it's uncontrollable forces. If, 100 tons of ice came crashing down on him, well, that's the end of him. That's you ain't making it out of that tunnel. So, but the point is, like, you can just see the thought system is like he's got himself into a situation where he has to keep doing it, because that's his whole identity. That's his mission, his purpose in life. And so I've got to keep doing these freezing cold swims and putting my body through this in order to do this, in order to fight climate change. But I'm like, dude, the climate is changing all the time anyway. Like, you can't stop change in this world, because that's how it works. The climate will not be the same now as it is in 10 years, or as it is in 100 years. And actually,
Yeah.
I think that has very little to do with human beings. That's just natural forces. You've got this massive ball of fire called the sun. There've been periods of warming, there've been periods of cooling in the earth. Maybe we're contributing it to some extent, but I think we're going through a natural cycle of warming. It's happened before, it will happen again. And to try and fight it is insane. But you see how the ego works when you start going into this, and you attach your identity to any cause or any form in this world.
There's many little traps where it's like a you're telling yourself, no, I'm doing this for a good cause, but there is still an I in there.
Oh, there's a huge I there. You
Or
can see his whole identity.
I am unselfish for doing this. I am a fighter for this cause.
Yeah.
There's always I.
Yes.
So
that's the little I that identifies as Lewis Pugh. I'm the champion of the Arctic regions, and I've got to keep doing this to keep feeding the ego. Because if I don't do this, these swims, then I'm not that person. I'm not that identity anymore. So hopefully he doesn't kill himself. Maybe eventually he'll kind of realize, okay, I can actually stop. You know what I mean? It's like I don't have to kill myself for this. I can stop and I can leave it to someone else to do. And maybe the penguins, they've been going for millions of years or whatever. Maybe they'll be okay without me. Maybe they'll actually manage to survive. It's not my responsibility to save the world. Maybe not. Who knows? Depends on whether he can get over the ego identity and kind of find a place of some kind of like, okay, actually I don't have to do this anymore. Do you know what I mean? I don't have to do it anymore. I can find peace and rest in myself. I don't have to have this driving compulsion to get into freezing cold water and swim every day. It's amazing what the mind can drive people to do, because that is seriously uncomfortable. You're going through serious physical discomfort to do it, but he will do that because his identity is more important. Because the mind's identity is more important than the physical discomfort to him. And as you say, you can justify it all you like.
Yes, exactly.
But
and you
actually, if you really look at it from this perspective, you've got to go, it's just ego. It's just ego, and it's not actually helping you or anyone, really, because you're just perpetuating the whole illusion. Oh, there really is climate change. There really is a world to be saved. There really are pain to see. And a lot of people would not agree with this. There's many people who go, oh, well, but you can't do that because, there are important causes in this world. And you've got to stand for what's right. And but none of it's right. That's what
it doesn't work. Like,
it doesn't work. Knock yourself
that
out.
I've gone on. That's how I know that it doesn't work, because it's like, I feel like I've lived like, I don't know how many lives in one lifetime, by the way, but like, I've sort of gone down that path, and eventually it gets to a point of, this is not working and this is not making sense anymore.
I think everyone eventually does, because you can find any kind of cause in the world, and you can go, I'm going to be the champion of this, but you're trying to fix a broken thought system. You'll never fix it. So like, it's just pointless. You can expend all your time and energy and it just going nowhere. You're really just spinning around in the dream, like a hamster on a hamster wheel, going round and around within this thought system. And the course is saying, no, you've got to interrupt the whole pattern. You've got to interrupt this whole pattern. You've got to get out of the whole system, which means you've got to go, that's your only salvation. There's only one place you can go for salvation from this. And that's to this love, which is still in your mind. It's still there, even though you've got this other side going on. That's still the truth, and that's still what you really want. And you can choose that in any situation. Because of the nature of the split mind and how the universe got created, in every situation you still have a choice. You can choose that, or you can choose this. It's not always obvious what that choice is, but that's the mind training. The more you train your mind, the more you start to be able to discern what the correct choice is. What's the inspired choice? What's the Holy Spirit's choice in the situation? And sometimes that's do nothing. Sometimes that's do something, but do it in a very, poised and peaceful way. And
excuse me, sorry.
Yeah,
I'm going to have to take urgent call, so I will go now. But thank you. It's been interesting.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Sorry, we didn't have time to get to meditation.
It's fine. It's fine.
Sorry about that.
It's all right.
It's really okay. Thank you. Okay.
All right, Carol.
Bye.
I hope you see you tomorrow.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye.
So, so it's a way out, you know, and it's not an easy path. I mean, make no mistake, Nadia, this is not an easy path. You want to take this takes you right up against the ego, against the entire world. The world is based on this thought system. You know, all of its structures, and he says, all of its structures, its leaders, its ethics, its gods, its laws, its rules are all based on this. So you have to deny it all. That's not an easy thing to do while you're here, but you can do it because it's just happening in the mind. So he says, you know, seek not to change the world, but seek to change your mind about the world. You can't fix the world, but you can change your mind about it. And that's quite easy to do, actually. That's why he says it's actually quite easy, this course. Just change your mind and be guided in, you know, what you're doing while you're here. And actually you can have a pretty happy dream because you just interpret everything through the eyes of the Holy Spirit. And so none of this stuff really exists for you anymore. And you only see love. And that becomes your reality. As I said, that's not an easy thing to do, given that you're being bombarded with all this stuff all the time. But it's possible. It's doable. Yeah. Jesus did it. Buddha did it. There are people who've done it. Gone into that, so into the oneness that their mind is not influenced by the projections anymore. They realize it's just false. This is all false projection. And I can't believe any of it. So I'm so rooted in the oneness that none of this really matters. None of this really means anything. So how can I be affected by it if it's meaningless? If it has no reality, then how can I allow I can't allow this to affect me. But it's to get that on a very, very deep level. And that's mind training. You know, the rest of your life is the dedication to, okay, I'm going to, in every situation, I'm going to choose this rather than this.
Yeah.
And you know, if you do that, then you're fulfilling your function here. You're doing what you're supposed to do. Because that's all you can do. You can't fix this place. You can just correct your mind and leave. But you know, you talked about the idea of suicide. If you leave too soon, by ending your dream prematurely, then you haven't learned your lessons. You've still got guilt and sin and individual identity and all this stuff knocking around in your mind. Well, guess what? You come back.
Funny enough, if you can actually survive sort of through that period of suicidal thoughts, there's a freedom at the end of it.
Yeah.
That, because you've realized the reason why you want to end it all is because it doesn't make sense. It's a cruel world. It's horrible and blah, 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 and everything.
Yeah.
So I've bought into all of that, and so I believed into all of that. But once you actually go through those continuous suicidal thoughts, and eventually you go through it, and you decide, you make the decision, because there's always the decision, because if I wanted to die, well, I'd be dead, you know. But there's always like another decision also keeping me still on track. And that one has actually then, that whole experience has led me to this, which has led me now to the way through. And since then, I actually found a bit of, I found freedom in death, basically. Because like I let everything go. Everything that I made matter so much to me, I just let it go. And it felt a lot better. And it opened me up to life again, in a way, in a sense that I had some energy again and could now start focusing back on my truer purpose.
Yeah, that's kind of how it works. You know, you die to the separate self. You know, they say you die before you die. So you don't die in the body, but the ego dies. So that separate identity, that separate self dies, and that's an ongoing process. You know, you've probably still got more of that to let go of and more to undo. But that's the spiritual journey. You die to the separate self. Now you continue. Your body's not dead. In fact, your body will probably be more alive than ever, because it's like, hey, actually, free of all this guilt and sin and fear and depression and, you know, the hormones and the chemicals that start getting produced when you're happy, make the body pretty healthy, happy, functional. And then you can actually be an agent of this oneness, this love coming into the world in your unique way. Your special function is to find how you direct this love through, you know, this particular channel that is your personal identity as Nadia, and the body that you have and the life that you have. And there's only one of you. You're unique in this world. So it's a unique expression of love in this world. And so that's a special function.
The special function.
Yeah, it's a special function. But you're not identifying with the character anymore. You're not going, I'm doing this because I want Nadia to be the special one. You're going, no, I want to be an instrument of this love coming through me into the world. And that is not Nadia, that's God, that's love, that's oneness, that's source coming through me, using this temporary construct of the ego and the personality and the physical form to express itself in the world, in whatever way I feel called to do. And that is when you start finding your higher purpose. Because the Holy Spirit will show you. It'll say, okay, yeah, you know, this is what you need to do, not to fix the world or to change the world. This is what you need to do to correct your mind, to change your mind about the world. This is your path back to God. And if you start following that path, it's inevitable that you must start to help others on that path. You must awaken others on the path. Because you're now teaching that by who you are. You still there, Nadia?
That energy itself emanates outwards, and it's in that is the helping others to actually return to God in the same way.
Yeah. If you do it and you really embody this thought system, and you really let the Holy Spirit guide you, you surrender your life to God, it's another way of putting it, then you become one of the saviors of the world. You become someone who can help other people to find their way out of the dream. And you also will help within the dream to make it a better dream, a happier dream. Just kind of by default. That's not really the purpose. You're not doing it to make it a better dream, but that's kind of a consequence of love, because it will make it a happier dream. And that's really all you can do. You can't fix it. You can't stop change from happening like Lewis Pugh's doing. You can't. So you can correct your mind, and you can allow yourself to be guided and inspired to act in the right way, and just let that kind of flow through you. And that's the enlightened state. If you can really get into that state and stay there, well, then your experience here is about the best that you can possibly have, because you're experiencing love all the time, experiencing love and peace and joy, and you're extending them out, and that will make a difference to people you relate to, you communicate to. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to go do something extraordinarily big. Sometimes just do it in wherever you are, in your situation. You're living with people, interacting with people. It's not about grandiose anything, but just feel what you get called to do. Right now I'm writing a business plan for a new alternative economy, because that's kind of what I feel called to do, because I think something needs to be done. But that, you don't have to do anything like that. But we've all got our own path. Yours might be, focusing on animals. Or the whole point is it's your corrections, the correction of your mind to take you back to God, to take you back to oneness. That's the important thing. Yeah. And however that looks for you.
It makes the purpose make a lot more sense, because otherwise you're doing it for the sake of I don't know what. But once you're coming from that space of God, love, and oneness, it's not an insane purpose.
No, it's the only true purpose. And then so this is the idea of flow. is that instead of making the end so important, that you want to get an end result. You still there, Nadia? Just freezing
A
up.
lot more sense, because I had to actually relook at my purpose that I thought was my purpose in life and that I was going to do, and realized, okay, no, that doesn't make sense at all. It's not going to actually lead to anything. And this was what I actually needed, because now it's helped me make slight changes to the purpose that I felt within me, because now the drive is different.
Yeah.
So where the drive is coming from, it will be the same thing, but the drive is different. And so the outcome then from that will also be different. So it's like inspired action as opposed to just egoic action.
Yeah, exactly. Inspired action is flow, where it's not about the end result. The ego always says, no, it's about, getting the end result, changing this on the level of form. The flow state says, no, it's not really about the end result. That's a consequence that will happen, will look after itself. But it's the process itself that is what's valuable. So by taking this action, by doing this, I'm in a state of flow. I'm connecting with my source. I'm extending love outwards as I'm doing this. That's the whole point. The experience of it is the point. So I'm in the moment. I'm connected to my source. I'm present. I'm fully in that higher consciousness, the high state of mind. When I'm doing that activity, doing whatever, then you start to reconnect with source through what you're doing. That's the whole point. The outcome really doesn't actually matter, because the form doesn't really matter. Then it show whatever happens. So if it's a success on the worldly level, great, that's all right. I can fine, just let it flow. If it's not, and there's no apparent success on the worldly level, well, that's okay too. So you have to find a way to kind of survive on this level. That can sometimes be a conflict, but I believe if you really find that purpose and find that flow, then the flow of whatever you need, physical resources and material resources, will come, because you're in your flow, and the universe supports that. Spirit supports that. When people say the universe, I'm always a bit. The universe, often they mean this universe. Well, that's the ego mind. The universal mind made up the universe. So you got to be very clear that God's universe, God's creation, and this physical universe are not the same. They are distinct. But love or oneness, the true creation, underpins this whole thing. It's never gone away. It's still there. It's just been covered over by the insane ideas of the ego. So I hope that was helpful.
That was very helpful. Thank you very much. Like every question that I had that actually came at me from going through the reading and the video and the audios and everything that I've done. So thank you so much for taking the time to actually guide me through it. It actually made a lot of sense, and it helps, and it's actually guided me to where I would like to place my focus on, and where to actually basically ask guidance for, to actually assimilate it in a little bit more.
Yeah, great. Well, that's the whole idea of the course. It's to just reconnect you really with your own source. There's something in your own mind that's there. It's always been there. It's just been buried, covered over. And so all I'm doing is facilitating you to reconnect with that. You can reconnect with that. You can listen to the Holy Spirit. Your life's going to go well. Keep listening to the ego, not so well.
No, we've done that route.
Yeah, well, we've all done it. I think every human being comes and there's the ego to work through, and unless you're some, like Ramana Maharshi woke up at 16. Going, how easy, he just got it. Boom. He was doing his homework one day, suddenly went through this intense fear of death. He went within, he did some internal inquiry. He was like, no, this is all illusion. This cannot be. There's only one self.
Damn.
And whoop, into like bliss for the rest of his life.
Is that the book that you that's part of there's like a bibliography at the end? It was one about a yogi. Is it that yogi?
Yeah, that's Yogananda, Paramahansa Yogananda. But there are books. They're books written by Well, they actually weren't
Oh, I
written by
love
him.
the one that I would actually recommend is Living with the Himalayan Masters. That gives you an insight into what it is to be a
Mm,
yogi and
mm,
to really live that life and the experiences that they actually go through. So
mm,
that's been my insight into like yoga and the yogi, the
yeah,
proper yogis.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a whole different. I mean, in the East, they just, you know, there's been people who they dedicate their entire life to this. This is what they do. There's no
Yeah,
other purpose. They just, so he just blissed out for the rest of his life, and he gave some teachings, but he really said the only teaching is silence. He said, you know, the words just going into the oneness, going into the one self, and experiencing it. And you know, he was so rooted in that people would come to him and they would feel that peace just by sitting with him, around him. They would,
yeah.
you naturally kind of absorb some of that energy and that peace. And so, you know, obviously then he attracted disciples and whatever. But in the end, it's, you know, you've got to do it for yourself. So the master can't do it for you. He can show you the way, but
No.
you've got to correct. You've got to correct your own mind, which is
It's just your
why.
internal work. And honestly, I've actually, since starting the course, I've actually been to actually, like, yeah, some of it's challenging and it's this and that, but it's been expansive. I think that's the word. It's created a feeling of expansion within myself
Hmm,
to the point where, you know, I'm excited about it. So I'm enjoying the experience so far. It's
hmm,
jarring, but I take a step back and I'm aware of the jarring.
hmm,
And then, you know, then obviously I look with it and see, well, what is causing this jarring? But I mean, so far it's been really helpful and it's being lived as I am actually doing it
hmm,
on a day-to-day basis.
hmm. Well, that's the idea. That's,
So
you know, it's no point in having a spiritual path and you don't live it. Not something you sort of study and get grades in. It's meant to be.
it's sort of like I've started seeing changes already, changes in thought,
Mm,
changes in my interactions with people
mm,
that were different ways of interacting with people that were, let's just say, they had a lot of drama, you
mm,
know, and there's been changes in that, and it's been actually clearing out the way for me to free my own energy up, so I can actually move forward in where I want to go,
yeah, because that's what it does. And
or where
it's
I'm
not,
meant
as
to
I
go.
said, it's not an easy path. You have
No,
times
no,
when you
not at
go
all.
like, oh, seriously, because you got to
No,
face
it's
your
not. No,
ego.
it's not.
Right? You got to face your ego, and it's not nice to look at the guilt and the sin and the fear and your own desire to attack and hate and destroy, and you know, it's not nice. No one wants to do
Mm.
that. But he's saying, look, it's the only way. If you don't face that and you keep running away from it, and then it keeps having power over you, and it'll keep coming up in your subconscious, and it'll keep coming up in your
I
actions
actually,
and in your life.
like, coincidentally, there was no coincidences, but I was looking into movies on Netflix. I don't know if you've heard of Gerald's Game. It's a horror.
Who?
Gerald's Game. It's
Gerald
a movie on
Game?
Netflix. Yeah,
No, I haven't heard of
it is a horror though.
it. Right.
But the meaning behind it was this woman at the facing of her own death. She ends up having to face going inside and facing everything that has been actually there, and sort of she's kind of been pulling her strings, like she's been a puppet to
Mm,
all these different ideas and all these different traumas and all these different things that's been pulling her back and forth without her realizing it, and she had to face it. So it's a horror, but it's got like a very good story behind it, and how she
mm,
actually faces everything and how she actually comes out of it. And I
mm.
found it amazing for like a horror movie to actually be so brilliant, and funny enough, actually in alignment with what you know, what I've been doing and going through it.
No, well, you know, the truth is out there. The truth is in many forms. Movies, a lot of movies. Uh,
Yeah,
any movie that really has some kind of, you know, deeper meaning. That's you know, not just a skopskit and donor, you know, kind of action flick.
it,
There's some kind of
yeah.
substance to it. There's there's or some, you know, gruesome horror, because you make gruesome horrors and it's just like a, you know, all of
no,
that
that's
stuff. But
the
if there's
bad
a
of
deeper meaning, then there's
so
always
that's
there's always this element of transformation. It's always the light and the dark, and you know how the character moves from the darkness to the light, and there's some kind of process of healing that happens in the movie, however that, you know, plays out for them. Because that's how it is. That's, you know, that's what this world is about, and that's the only real purpose in it. And so, you know, you playing the movie, you playing the star in your own life. The idea is to find your path. You know, you're the star of your own movie. How do you find your way out of the darkness to the light, and actually, you know, allow the light to come through you, and that will play out in your specific story that's unique to you, and that's kind of what you're here to do. So, you know, of course, it's not saying, oh well, you know, just end it all. It's saying, no, you've got to, you know, there's a path. You're going to wake up slowly, gradually. If you woke up all at once, it'd be too shocking for you. You're not ready to just go into oneness. You know, it's a gradual process of correcting your mind, and your life is that process, taking these little steps, baby steps, back to God, and it, you know, it plays out for you as exactly as it should play out. Even the difficulties, you know, the difficulties are absolutely necessary in the letting go process. You don't have the difficulties to trigger the, you know, the difficult thoughts and emotions. Then how can you look at them and become aware of them and let them go? So they remain kind of, you know, repressed, stuck down there. And any story, I mean, any good story, you don't go and watch a movie where everyone's all happy all the time.
everyone's all happy.
Because there'd be no story. It'd just be like, well, that's so boring. You know, there's a drama. There's like the characters have to go through some difficulty, some pain, some suffering, whatever, to transcend it. That's how any good story is.
I actually thank the people and the situations that have caused this stirring up of everything inside of me. At the end of it, when I take a look back, my closure on it is to actually thank the situation and the people and everything and everyone involved, because otherwise, well, I wouldn't have grown from it, and I wouldn't have reached to where I had to reach to within myself to find the true self.
Yeah, exactly. Which is really the test of whether you've really forgiven or not. And you actually thank someone and say, thank you for that. You know, even though it hurt, wasn't nice, wasn't pleasant at the time, and, you know, the ego's going, oh, no, but what about, like, it showed you something. It made you aware of something in you that you needed to let go of. And that's very helpful. If you approach. So, you know, this theory, this is the theoretical foundation, and the practice of forgiveness that goes with it. There's nothing else that will do this for you. So it says, like, there's no other way but forgiveness. There's no other way. You can't fudge it. There's many spiritual paths, many practices. Some of them can be helpful, some not so helpful. But in the end, you have to do this radical forgiveness. You have to collapse everything you believe in time and space. There's no other way out of the dream. And so it's just setting it at the highest level and saying, well, why bother with anything else? Like, you can pursue all kinds of other paths and healing modalities and all kinds of stuff. But until you do this, you just really spinning around in illusion. You call it magic. You know, you're trying to fix things with magic thoughts. You know, you'll fix the problem with some kind of healing modality or some kind of medicine or some kind of pill, whatever it is. Even if it's alternative, it's supposedly better. It's still the same thought system. So ultimately, you know, you got to.
And eventually, eventually we reach a point where these things that we've had enough of actually are taken away. Like, I've literally been stripped bare of everything that I was pretty much reliant on. And to the point where now there isn't even any psychologist. So where do I turn to? Well, has psychology actually helped me in the past? No, not really. Ego, and it's more ego. And
well, he does say somewhere in the course. He does say somewhere, well, actually, nothing happens in psychology, because what the psychologist is doing is they're coming from the perspective of, well, the world is real, and you're real as an individual, and now we're going to try and fix your real individual problems through, you know, talking through them and whatever, and that's not really going to. get you anywhere.
At some point, I'm going to have to, I was angry at first, and at some point, I'm going to be thankful that it was actually not there, because I had to turn to, I was tired of doing the same thing, and, well, it wasn't helping.
In the end, nothing else but forgiveness will help.
Yes.
You have to collapse the whole belief in the ego. Anything else is just, well, you're just avoiding really what you need to really do. And so why would you do that when you've got to?
You sort of reinforce and perpetuate the ego by actually doing that. That's what I actually realized. It would make me more angry. It would make me more upset. It would make me feel worse. I would leave there feeling drained.
Yeah.
so
what's the point? That's not healing. No.
Yeah. No.
In the end, it's up to you to do your forgiveness, and no one can do that for you. No one can let go for you. But there are principles. There's teachings. There's principles. There's techniques like breathwork, meditation. It can all help, right? That's all part of the process of training your mind to let go. That's simple. That's what I call the art of letting go. How do you do this? How do you let go?
We suffer enough until we decide, I don't want to suffer anymore.
Yeah.
That's you have to, for me, I had to reach the pinnacle point of, maybe I'll do maybe I'll do that, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that. Suffer. Suffering reaches such intensity where eventually you're just like, no, it's just not worth it anymore. There is another way. And now is the time that I choose the other way. Because
which is how the whole course came into being. You know the story of how it came.
I know it. The scribe Helen, I don't remember her name. She was actually an atheist. Funny enough, and all the languages, like the terminology.
So I'll just briefly give you the story and then I suppose we should go. Maybe we can do a quick meditation. So Helen Schuckman, is this. She's Jewish by birth, but she's an atheist. She's quite highly strung. She's got a lot of investment in her personal self, in her career. She's working in this academic environment. She's a psychologist, research psychologist at the College of Physicians and Surgeons in New York City, part of Columbia University. And it's a very difficult environment. There's a lot of infighting, a lot of backstabbing, because people are all invested in themselves. And so one day she's driving with her boss, a guy called William Thetford. He's head of the department. And they're going to a disciplinary hearing because they have these frequently because there's all this, stuff going on. And he just turned to her and he said, Helen, there must be a better way. Like, this is crazy. Like another disciplinary hearing. Why is there all this fighting and conflict and hatred and attack? And, surely there must be a better way. So it was like a cry for okay, enough already. Like, I'm open to another way. And she agreed with him. She said, I agree. And I'll help you to find it. And as a result of that kind of joining of minds in this common purpose, inspired by the Holy Spirit to find a better way, she started having dreams about Jesus, and saw herself as a priestess in white robes. He started speaking to her and giving quite helpful information and suggestions because she was pretty highly strung and quite anxious. And then 6 months after that, he started dictating the course to her because she was obviously had a mind that could receive that, could hear his voice. And she said it was just like this voice speaking to me, and she would just write down what it said. And that's how the course came. And then Bill Thetford, because it was a joint assignment, helped her. He helped her to type it up, and he encouraged her to keep going. She said, I couldn't have done it without him. It was their, it was a collaboration. It was their joint assignment to produce this amazing, really. It's an amazing spiritual teaching. It's quite incredible. That and we're actually more fortunate now than in Jesus's time, even if he were here, because you have a complete exposition of his thought system. Of course, it didn't exist 2,000 years ago.
It's cutting off a little bit. I'm not sure why.
Okay. So
what was the last thing you said?
I just said it's a complete exposition of his entire thought system. You know, he's gone
Yes,
into
yeah,
comprehensive detail, 1,300 pages. So, okay, this
yeah.
is what I thought. This is how I did it. This is how I got out of the matrix. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. I'm going to lead you through it step by
And
step. I'm going to give you
also
a
this is what I
theoretical
meant.
text, and I'm going to give you a workbook to train your mind step by step to think this way, because that's how I got out, and I'm going to show you how I did it. So,
Awesome.
like for me, that's just like, well, why would you listen to any teaching in the world, any worldly teacher, when you've got someone who's now managed to transmit his teaching into the world in a book, and he's given it to you chapter and verse, it's all there, it's all laid out. Like, you don't need anything else, it's there. You've got a teaching of a master who's giving you very, very detailed instructions. This is, you know, to how to correct your mind and to escape from the dream. So it's a master teaching, and just study it. You know, you don't. What I say to people is, you know, you don't have to look elsewhere. You don't have to go anywhere else, because anything else is really, it's either just going to confirm what the course is saying already, or it's going to be something that denies it. That's actually taking you off the path, because it's got some of the ego's stuff built in there, and you know, you're trying to make the dream real and the individual identity real, and that's not going to really help you. This, for me anyway, it's the only way out. I don't think there is another way, and it corresponds to what, you know, the highest teaching in the East, the Advaita Vedanta, which is all these masters. It's the same thing. They're saying there's one source, there's one Brahman, they call it. There's one God. It's a non-dual teaching, and everything else is illusion. It's just a Western version of it.
They call it Maya. Maya is the term for illusion.
The Maya, or the Buddhists call it samsara. You know, there's various names for it, but it's illusion. It's an illusion created by a false mind, and the course just says the same thing, but it says it in such detail, in a way that really gets you to understand the psychology of this, you know, the guilt and the sin and the fear, and how this all fits together, and how the world was created, why the world was created. In such a clear way that you just won't find it in the path. There's no other path that I've found that gives you this detailed understanding of guilt and sin, and why that comes about, and, you know, why there's fear and punishment, and, you know, how the world came about. It's pretty amazing. So
there's been metaphysical teachings that I've found, but this one makes it accessible. Makes it have a lot more, like, more accessible to people in general, I think. So there are others that coincide with it, that agree with it, just uses different terminology. But this one is a very accessible way to actually reach or have the understanding.
It is. It's both very high level metaphysics, but there's a very practical way of living it, and that's this idea of forgiveness in your daily life.
That's what makes it different.
So, you know, whereas I think Advaita Vedanta, I mean, I haven't, to be fair, I qualify this, I haven't studied it in detail. I haven't gone into all Vedas, etc. But it has a theory, but doesn't necessarily have a practical application of it in this world, of like, okay, how do you actually live your life in this world, but not be of the world? How do you actually do that? Other than to just check out of the world. You know, the Eastern path is traditionally, okay, well, you just dedicate your mind to this, you become a yogi, a mystic, and that's what you do. That's your entire life. You meditate, you pray, you fast, you know, do all these spiritual practices to dedicate your mind to enlightenment. And they kind of, maybe not so much anymore, but they've always had a culture that sort of supports that. You can go and, you know, you can go to an ashram, and if you dedicate your life, you'll be supported. You'll find a way to live because you're a monk, and the community supports you, and so on. In the West, it's not as easy. In the West, we don't really have that structure or that system. So it was, well, you can, you know, I suppose you could go and go into the church, but that's not really the same thing. You know, it's a formal religion. It's not, we don't really have that sort of ashram kind of, you can go somewhere and, you know, you'll actually be supported. You don't have to look after yourself. The ashram has some resources and people are making donations. The community supports it, basically. It doesn't really exist here. So this was given as a teaching in, for the West, for the Western mind, in the society we've created, a very busy, hectic one. Say, okay, but you can do this in your life. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to check out of the world. In fact, I suggest you don't. You just approach everything from this perspective, and so you'll get all your lessons in the world, because you'll have the conflicts and you'll have the difficulties and you'll have the obstacles and whatever in your life, and then you apply the teaching and you live it. And so it's quite practical. You don't have to go anywhere else. You just carry on doing what you're doing. Maybe that changes in time, but you just see it differently, which means that it is accessible. Anyone can do this. You don't have to have some kind of special environment, or just do it from wherever you are.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I thank you. I enjoyed that chat.
I've got to quickly go. I don't know if we're going to have time for meditation.
That's okay. Don't do a meditation. It's all right.
Will there be Will there be a recorded one that you're going to send through?
Well, I've got plenty of recordings that I can send through, so I can say I'll send another one through.
It's my nighttime. It's what I do at night now.
Yeah, sure.
So if you can just send one through, please. Thank you. Because we didn't manage to do the one on this one.
Yeah.
But this was really helpful. Thank you very much.
Good. My pleasure. So this recording I'll upload this to YouTube. I've recorded the audio, so I'll make it available. You can I'll send a link in one of the emails. Maybe not tomorrow's email, but I'll send a link in one of the emails.
All right, awesome.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right.
And take care of yourself. Hope you have a good night. Okay, bye.
Have a nice evening. Bye.